In a previous video, I said, now normally I would leave his parents out of this, but even if they weren't signatories on the property down in the Bahamas, Mom raised a bunch of money for political candidates, and it just so happened that Sam did the same thing of just donating money to political candidates. Dad was a tax guy who managed to go ahead and raise a bunch of money for FTX. So they're tied up in this too. And they can say that they didn't know what was going on, but it's going to be really hard for them to make that stand up in any kind of a court. You may remember that Sam Bankman-Fried's mom is Barbara Fried. Barbara Fried runs an organization called Mind the Gap. It's a political organization that's kind of super secretive because what they want to do is they want to get people to send money, donate money to all these different house races. In 2018, they picked out 20 undervalued and underfunded house races and spent $9 million on the most competitive house races. Why is that important? Stick with me. Since then, his parents have been implicated, not charged. I want to make that completely clear. They've been implicated, meaning I'm not the only person who kind of figured out that they might be pulled into this. His parents reportedly paid $10,000 a week for security. By the way, that's too much. If you ever get into bank fraud problems and you need security, talk to me, I'll hook you up. Carolyn Ellison, head of Alameda Research, and Gary Wang, who's the co-founder of FTX, have started cooperating with authorities, which should be making Sam Bankman-Fried nervous right now, because they just confessed to a bunch of things that implicate him. Some of the charges: Wang, the co-founder of FTX, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, conspiracy to commit commodities fraud, conspiracy to commit securities fraud. Carolyn Ellison, who's the head of Alameda Research, 2 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, conspiracy to commit commodities fraud, conspiracy to commit securities fraud, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. Oh my God, those guys are in it full hog, which means the other hog, Sam Bankman-Fried, is getting roped into this. On top of that, Carolyn Ellison was singled out by the SEC complaint in engaging in artificial manipulation of FTT. What is FTT? That's the token of FTX. And if you don't know any of that, you should have seen my previous video. I explained it all there as if you were 10 years old. Go watch it, come back. Now, before Sam was charged, he was supposed to testify to Congress. And he leaked his testimony to the press because he's not that bright of a guy. He starts out by saying that he f***ed up, which is blunt and the understatement of the century. Crashing your car is f***ing up. Calling your girlfriend the wrong name? That's f***ing up. Transferring funds between 2 companies because your one company is failing, so you transfer your client's deposits from one company to shore up the other company? That's beyond screwing up.
Was that wrong? Should I not have done that?
Yes, George, aka Larry David, that was wrong.
I don't think so. And I'm never wrong about this stuff. Never.
Before we get too deep into this, it's worth remembering how Sam made a name for himself in the cryptocurrency world first. Sam was doing something called arbitrage. I have a whole explainer on that in my previous video too, but just to give you the shortcut of it. Arbitrage is when you take commodities or currencies that are being sold in one area and you buy them cheap and you sell them in another area for more money. Let's say that every day that you went to work, you stop and you realize that someone's selling bananas for $2. And then as you go around the corner, you realize there's someone buying bananas for $3. And you get a light bulb over your head and you think, all I have to do is buy these $2 bananas, go around the corner and sell them for $3 and I make $1. So you do that. And suddenly you get the bright idea, and the next day you bring more money and you buy a bunch of bananas for $2 and you sell a bunch of bananas for $3. And you start doing that more and more until you're taking all your profits from the previous day and buying more bananas and selling more bananas. That's what Sam Bankman-Fried was doing, except instead of bananas, he was doing currency. He was doing cryptocurrency. He was buying from Japan and selling in the US. There was a disparity in the prices of those two markets. And what happened is every time that he bought and sold, which he was able to do a bunch of times a day, he made money. By the time he was through, he was making millions of dollars a day. He was going bananas. And here's the best part of it. It was completely safe because he knew what the selling price was and he knew what the buying price was and he could do it instantly. So he was making a guaranteed profit every single time and it was legal. But if you think about it, it wasn't that smart. He was just making an observation and making a bunch of money off of that observation. Why is that important? Well, from the outside, it looked like he was brilliant. He was making millions of dollars every day in cryptocurrency. So why wouldn't you invest in someone who makes millions of dollars every day in cryptocurrency, not knowing that he just made that money because of simple disparity between two markets? But the bigger point is, he's not that smart, and neither are the people that were investing with him. So let's go back to the testimony that he never gave. He starts out by chewing out the people who advised him to file Chapter 11. He says that he never should have done it. Why? Because he thinks that he could have gotten bailed out by all the people that wanted to invest in FTX. You see, there were last-minute people that were like, hey, we'll give you a bunch of money for your company. And in his head, he thinks that would have bailed out all of his investors. He also complains that he never had access to his spreadsheets. He never had access to the data and notes that he took. He insists that all this information would have allowed him to get FTX out of trouble. Moreover, he insists that FTX International was separate from FTX Domestic. He says that FTX Domestic only allowed Americans to invest as opposed to FTX International, which is the company that he says lost all the money. And all that would make a lot of sense if he hadn't been accused of transferring money between his different companies in order to shore up other companies. So why is he saying it's so important that those are different companies? From there, he gets into the weeds about how he believes that what happened was totally legal. He explains how Alameda Research lost 50% of its value in a 3-day period. He further states the substantial amount of Alameda Research's money was in FTT. FTT is the token that's owned by FTX. You know how he explained that those funds are totally separate? He doesn't intermingle them? Yeah. Anyway, he goes on to explain that his clients started pulling their money out of FTX because of Binance's CEO. Binance's CEO was originally going to buy FTX, but then he pulled out of the deal, and when he pulled out of the deal, all the people that were invested in FTX were like, this might be a problem. I'm going to pull my money out. Go figure. All of this means that he didn't keep his customers' money separate in the different companies like he was supposed to. If he had, then he wouldn't be in this kind of a financial problem in the first place. I'll let people that are much more financially intelligent than me break down the rest of the details of what he said. But here's the real dick move that Sam Bankman-Fried makes. He blames the people, the lawyers who are working on the Chapter 11 thing, for taking money out ahead of time. You see, when Enron was taken over by the lawyers who were the bankruptcy lawyers, they immediately took out a large amount of money. It turned out being $700 million in fees. And they were paid off $700 million in fees that could have been paid to the clients that got defrauded by Enron. In a similar way, the lawyers for FTX, the bankruptcy lawyers that are coming in, the people that are representing them, they took out $4 million and they made sure they were paid up front because they realized Sam Bankman-Fried might be just putting this stuff aside for himself. And all this time, Sam Bankman-Fried is pretending like all this money is accounted for. And he's pretending like you don't just take your client's money and invest it into something without their permission. That would be wrong. Do I think that Sam Bankman-Fried has burrowed away hundreds of millions of dollars for himself? Yes. Yes, I do. I think you should believe that too, because we've already established that he doesn't know the difference between one client's funds and the next. Sam Bankman-Fried goes on to insist that FTX International funds and FTX domestic funds were never mixed. If you believe that, I have cryptocurrency to sell you. And I'm not talking any cryptocurrency. I'm talking about FTT. Towards the end of his document, he says two different things. First of all, that he only has $100,000 in a bank account somewhere. And secondly, yes, he is taking something that is kind of a drug. It's an antidepressant. And he said that's because he's very sad. Sam pled not guilty to 8 counts, which is a possible 115 years in prison. Keep in mind, I'm not a lawyer. This is my summary of what I believe the counts to be. Counts 1, 2, and 3. Defrauding customers of FTX by misappropriating customer deposits to pay expenses of Alameda Research, his own hedge fund, and using that money to invest in other funds. Basically, it's robbing your own bank to pay your own bank. Count number 4, misleading lenders as to what he did with the money. Counts 5 and 6. Basically, he didn't tell the truth when they were trying to find out what happened. Count 7, wire fraud. Anything that you do with transferring money from one area to the next, if you do it illegally, is considered to be wire fraud. Count 8 is where things really get interesting because he's being accused of breaking campaign finance laws. Basically, he broke the law on who you can donate to, how much money you can donate to, and not being transparent about it. Where does all of this go? Well, he's free on $250 million bond. That was put up by his parents and 2 people that remain anonymous, and he kind of fought to keep those names anonymous right now. A judge blocked Sam Bankman-Fried from reaching into FTX funds or Alameda Research funds. That doesn't mean that he doesn't have money burrowed away somewhere. And now things get more interesting still. You see, there have been 4 different times within the last few months before he was indicted where the White House was meeting with him. They say that the meetings were to discuss the pandemic.
Again, this meeting with Sam Bankman-Fried was focused on pandemic prevention related matters and cryptocurrency and crypto exchanges.
Because this is the guy that you want to trust when it comes to talking about a pandemic. You go to a crypto guy, right? Sam Bankman-Fried met multiple times with Steve Ricchetti and Bruce Reed. Those are 2 of the most senior advisors in the Biden administration. On top of that, his brother, Gabriel, met a couple times with people in the White House as well. Gabriel was the head of a group called Guarding Against Pandemics. Their stated purpose was to get the House and the Senate to appropriate money to guard against future pandemics. How did they do this? Well, you see this $3 million DC townhouse? They held parties in there. Big parties, big lavish parties to try to raise money to stop future pandemics during COVID. One last point I wanted to make. You know how at the beginning of the video I talked about Barbara Fried, who's Sam and Gabriel's parent? Well, she had an organization called Mind the Gap, and part of the goal was to overturn these 20 tightly contested House races. One of those guys, Sean Casten, won. Now, I can't say for sure whether Sean Casten's race was one of the tightly contested races that Barbara Fried had targeted at the time. What I can tell you is that he won by 7 points, and that Gabriel Fried was hired as a legislative correspondent for Sean Casten in 2019. The way that I see it, the entire family has a transparency problem. They've been spending so much time trying to hide what it is that they're doing from the public that everything looks kind of suspicious. I don't know if Sean Casten hired Gabriel because Gabriel's mom raised money for him. I can't say for sure whether or not Barbara Fried was even involved in Sean Casten's fundraising. What I can say is that the entire family needs to stop being so secretive, and then maybe they'll look a little less suspicious to the rest of us who are watching them. My name is John. Check out my other videos. Check out everything I do. Thanks.